Thank you, Andy. Good morning, Nashville.
Good morning.
My name is Micki. I'm a real alcoholic. And I'm from Bryant, Texas, where the men are men and the sheep run scared. And the women are cunning, baffling, and powerful. Congratulations on 35 years of Music City Roundup. What a deal. What an amazing gathering of people. Yes, and as it was said earlier, normally people who would not mix, but we seem to mix pretty well. And it's been a fantastic weekend. A lot of love, a lot of fellowship, and a tremendous amount of love. I've enjoyed all the speakers, and Vanoy and I go way back, and I just love her with all my heart, and Earl and I go way back, and I love him with all my heart, and getting to see these guys and hang out with them some more is just absolutely incredible. And we don't get to see each other all the time, but when we do, we pick up where we left off, and that's the idea of true friendship. When we just get to pick up where we left off. I'm from Bryant, Texas, which is sister city to College Station, where Texas A&M University is. And it's about 100 miles north of Houston, for those of you that don't know. And just a little bit about myself, because I always forget to say it. I am, will soon be 61 years old. I have not been married since I've been sober. I have been fully self-supporting through my own contributions. When I got sober, my sponsor told me I'd never had to get married again if I didn't want to, and I haven't found it necessary. And that doesn't mean I haven't had relationships. I've had some relationships. I've been in love in sobriety. When I love. And I've had my heart broken several times. And the last time I had my heart broken, I went out and bought a new Harley. And so this past Memorial Day, I was privileged to be able to ride in Rolling Thunder in Washington, D.C. That was really cool. And a few years ago, I rode my motorcycle from Bryan College Station to Sturgis, South Dakota and back. So I'm still pretty bad, yeah, still pretty bad. So I'm doing those things, living on the firing line of life. I'm doing those things that I always sat on the bar stool and only talked about doing. And so, I believe in living on the firing line of life, and I'm enjoying my life. I want to tell you, this weekend my daughter has been privileged to be here with me. My daughter is absolutely the joy of my life, and I love her with everything that I have. Thank God I don't get what I deserve. And I will tell you that our hearts are heavy. February 5th of this year, my sobriety date is February 5th of 1987. My mother's extremely proud. My children are proud. The state of Texas is grateful. But this past February 5th, I went to my home group and we celebrated my 29th birthday. I ate cake and was with my sponsees and in my home group. And I went home after eating my cake and I went to sleep. And my daughter called me at about midnight, 12:30, screaming her husband had taken his life. And we have been dealing with this since February 5th, and it has been extremely painful, and it has been devastating. We found out just a few weeks ago his blood alcohol level was 36 times the legal limit. And, I know today, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he would be here had it not been for alcohol. And I'm not real sure if it was alcoholism or not, but he had Alcoholics Anonymous around him, and he was one that could not reach out for help. And this is a deadly illness that we have. And we die from this illness in many, many forms. So please keep us in your prayers as we try to wrap our heads around this and deal with this in so many different ways. There's so much red tape. There's so much emotional pain and mental pain and turmoil as we go through this. But I will tell you, this weekend has been awesome for my baby girl. She's been able to sleep, and she has been able to rest, and she's gotten a lot of love from a lot of people. And I will tell you that my hostess and Steve L. have been incredible. And I have the hostess with the mostest. And she has gone to any lengths. I got here Thursday, and I had that nagging feeling that I had forgotten something. And as I unpacked, I realized I had forgotten my slip to wear with my dress. So they, Andy and Steve drove me around everywhere yesterday. We went to TJ Maxx, we went to Walmart, we went to Ross looking for a slip. They don't have slips anymore. I mean, it's insane. They do not have slips anywhere. You can order them online, but you can't buy them in a store. And so I thought, okay, Mary Reagan told me a long time ago that anytime I was to speak from behind the podium, I was to talk like a lady, dress like a lady, and act like a lady. And so I'm thinking, I'm going to look like a hoe if I don't have a slip on. My dress is kind of sheer, And so Andy, determined to not have her speaker look like a hoe, sends me a text message about 11 o'clock last night with a picture, I got you a slip. She was willing to go to any lengths, and by God, she did. But we have had a blast with them this weekend, and being able to listen to my daughter laugh has been a joy that I cannot tell you, has just been amazing for me. Thank you, Nashville, for giving me a gift. So many gifts in so many ways. I'm here to share what it was like and what happened. I'll get on with it and what it's like today. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father was a wife-beating, child-beating alcoholic, and my mother's never had a drink in her life. Never smoked a cigarette, and only cusses when it's absolutely necessary. She is the hardest working woman I know. My mother was the first woman postal carrier in the 2 counties where I live. She has worked hard all of her life. When I was about 10, my mother could no longer take the abuse, and she gave my father the ultimatum to quit drinking or leave, and he left. I didn't understand why he left until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous almost 30 years later, when I realized that he could not stop drinking. And it was really tough on us. We were poor growing up. We didn't have those things except the bare necessities. But my mother always provided for my sister and I. And I was a wild child. I was a kid who was not good at getting positive attention, but I was good at getting negative attention. And if you're a kid like me, negative attention was better than no attention. So on Friday nights, while my sister was cheering the football team on, she was the one who made the straight A's. She was the one that was the class favorite. She was that cheerleader. And on Friday nights, while she was cheering the football team on, I was in the parking lot stealing hubcaps, I was going to get some attention. And I was the daredevil. I was the risk taker. I was the one, don't double dog dare me. I'm going to do it. And I started getting in trouble at an early age, long before I ever took that first drink. I started stealing as soon as I could walk. I started lying as soon as I could talk. I was just this wild and crazy kid. I think they would call that today ADHD. I don't know, but my mama's belt took care of a lot of that. And so I just, was wild and crazy. And my mom was working all the time. She was working all the time and not there to supervise a lot of what was going on with me. So I had a lot of self-will run riot. I did what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And my mom trusted me to do a lot of the things that I should have done, and it was unfortunate because I wouldn't do those things. And so I was just pretty much a hellion. I just was wild and crazy and started hanging out with older kids that were driving fast in cars and on motorcycles and all of those kinds of things, and started hanging out in pool halls at a young age. Started hustling pool when I was really young. Started hanging around tattoo parlors at a young age and started getting tattoos before it was cool for young girls to get tattoos. And I never had any, my body's pretty tatted up, but I never had any tattoos put on my breast, and there was a reason for that. As a young woman hanging around a tattoo parlor, I heard the story of a young woman who had a tattoo, rosebud tattooed on her breast, and when she turned 75, it had become a long stem rose. And, no matter how drunk I got, I could not get that out of my mind. But I started doing things that young girls shouldn't do. So I'm just wild and crazy, and I'm kind of like Earl. I didn't start drinking until I was 12, and that's kind of late nowadays, you know. But it wasn't a big deal. I was living in a little town called Hearne, Texas, a little Peyton Place town, and walking down the street with a couple of little by-thievery friends. Walking down the street, a neighbor had his garage door open. And in that garage were these cases of long neck Miller beer. And they were sitting out in the heat of the summer, just dust and cobwebs on them. So my friends and I went into his garage and stole some of this hot long neck Miller beer with that old gold label on there, and went down to my friend's house and opened that hot long neck Miller beer. We popped that top off of it, and it foamed all up. We sucked that foam off of it and drank some of that stuff down. And it didn't take long for us to reach that feeling of intoxication, instantly followed by nausea and vomiting. We didn't have those skills that would come later on. We didn't know about appropriately coating your stomach before you go out drinking. We didn't know about putting your finger down your throat to vomit so you could go back and drink some more. Nor did we know about putting one foot on the floor to keep the room from spinning. I mean, those would come later on. But we somehow got in the house, got in the bed, sick as a dog, and got up the next morning with my first hangover. My head was pounding, my eyes were bloodshot, I had this kind of green complexion, and my friend looked at me and said, "My God, Micki, I'll never do that again." And the rest of our years in junior high and high school, I never saw that girl tie one on again. I mean, she quickly saw what the problem was, knew what the solution was, and she never did it again. And I was just as sick as she was, and I remember that morning brushing my teeth with Brill cream. You know, when you mistaken that for toothpaste, yeah. And I remember looking at her just as sick as she was, and I said, "You know, you're absolutely right. I'll never do that again either." And I never did. I never drank hot Miller beer again, you know? There was something that happened differently for me than it did for my friend, and it would take me 20 years until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to find that I was bodily and mentally different from my friend. That feeling of that sense of ease and comfort that came at once by taking those few drinks did something differently for me than it did for my friend. I didn't know at the time that feeling that Earl described so well last night, that it put me okay in my own skin for the first time in my life, and it just stilled that madness that was going on inside of me, and it just made me all right for just a few moments, that the consequences of being sick were not great enough for me to not want to experience that again and again and again at every available opportunity. So I became the person that sought it out, and if I wasn't seeking it out, I was thinking about it all the time. You know, I couldn't wait for that school bell to ring on Friday afternoon, because I knew I was going to find something that night. There was going to be a party somewhere, and I was going to find that party. You know, I love Katie from Austin talks about getting that creepy guy at 7-Eleven to go in and buy your booze for you, you know. We had those people we'd go in to buy it for us. We started robbing parents' liquor cabinets to get it. Do whatever we could. I started getting a reputation for being able to drink more than the football players. And I thought they were the ones with the problems. because I'm drinking more than them, and they're passed out or they're throwing up, and I'm still partying. And I thought they were the ones with the problem. I didn't know I was developing a tolerance that would ultimately almost destroy me later on in my life. And I started having blackouts and coming to and not knowing what had happened, who I was with. And the day would come where my drinking would get to the point to where I was drinking over the shameful things I did while drinking. And that is that incomprehensible demoralization. About the age of 14, I found better living through chemistry. I started smoking those funny cigarettes. I started taking a lot of prescription pills. My name was never on the prescription bottle, but I took a lot of prescription pills. I started taking a lot of those black market pills where you take trips and never leave the room. Want to paint a house without a ladder. Maybe lay on the ground and listen to the grass grow. And it was not uncommon to find me out in a cow pasture after a heavy rain. When I tell you I'm a real alcoholic, my problem is not alcohol, nor is it those other things I do after I start drinking. When I tell you I'm a real alcoholic, my problem is living life sober. I don't like sober. Sober for me is boring. Sober for me is exactly what the big book describes. I grow restless, irritable, and discontent. I don't like being sober. Sober for me is an uncomfortable state of existence, and I need some relief from this existence. And I will do whatever I have to do to experience that sense of ease and comfort, despite whatever consequences are thrown my way. And I started getting in trouble, but back then the trouble we would get into is nothing like the consequences people are suffering today. A lot of times if we got stopped for DUI, they would follow us home, or if we got caught at minor in possession, the worst thing they could do is call your parents, That was a lot of the trouble we would get into. But as the trouble drinking career continued, the trouble would continue to grow and the consequences would continue to grow. And I'm so grateful, as we've heard many times this weekend, I'm so grateful for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that gives us the ability to look back at our lives and make some sense of it all. When I first got sober, I thought all the years of my life were nothing but a waste of time. And as we have heard many times from the podium this weekend, that all those years that I thought were wasted have the most value of my life today. Because the program has given me the ability to look back at my life, make sense of it all, and use it to help save others' lives. When I started working my steps, I looked back at my life, and one thing that was a driving force in my life, all my life, and up to this point, has been the need to love and to be loved. And I didn't know how to get that in a very healthy way. Sometimes still don't know how to do that in a very healthy way. But what happened for me at the age of 16, just wanting to love and to be loved and to feel important and to feel needed and to feel wanted, and not knowing how to get that in a good, healthy, nurturing way, I traded all that for sex. And what happened at age 16, I found myself pregnant and not knowing what to do. Well, in this day and age, if you're 16 and pregnant, it's not a big deal. But in 1972, it was a big deal in small town Texas. I ended up going to Austin. My sister was living there. She'd graduated high school. And I ended up staying with her in Austin and brought an illegitimate child into this world. A family came into my life that said, we will take this child and raise it as our own, with the condition you never see this child again. And I made that deal. I made that deal because I did what was best for that child. I was in no shape, form, or even willing to raise a child. but I knew it was best for her, and I held on to that for a long, long time, and it took 20 years for me to be able to say I did what was best for me. And I went back to small town Texas with a scarlet letter on my forehead. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew. And I will tell you, at 16 years of age, I had to have alcohol or some other chemical in my body that would allow me to walk out on the street and hold my head up and say, I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think. But you see, I'm an alcoholic. And I have this built-in sixth sense. All anybody had to do was look at me, and I knew what they were thinking. And knowing what other people are thinking about me has caused me a great deal of pain in my life, and sometimes still today. Because, you know, I'm telling you, I had no, at 16 years of age, there weren't any counselors on every street corner. I had no tools to deal with that level of pain and loss. I had no way to deal with that hole in my soul. And what I know today is that was a God-sized hole in my soul. And there's only one thing you can fill a God-sized hole with. And I had to find you to learn how to fill that hole. But it would take a long time. And I guarantee you, I tried to fill that hole with many, many things, many, many people, many, many material possessions, trying to fill that hole. But there's only one thing you can fill a God-sized hole with. And I had to have you to learn how to do that. I made my first geographic 45 minutes after I graduated high school, and I promise you, I don't know how in the heck I graduated high school. But 45 minutes after I graduated high school, I am out of Hearne, Texas, you see, because Hearne, Texas was my problem. And if I could just get out of Hearne, Texas, and go somewhere where no one knew my sordid past. I'm barely 17 years old, and I got the sordid past, right? But I'm going to go somewhere where no one knows me, and I'm going to start over. And I'm going to go somewhere, and I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to marry a man, and I'm going to have children to replace this child, and everything's going to be great, and I'm going to be wonderful. I'm going to be successful, and one day I'm going to come back and show them all, you know, and I'm going to be somebody. And I had these great dreams, and I had these great ideas, but I had no plan of action. And I moved 500 miles away to a small town right outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, where they party 24/7. Not a good idea for someone like me. I'm there 2 weeks and I end up in jail. And I'm thinking God is punishing me. I'm thinking if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. I'm thinking this is going to be my lot in life. This is all I deserve, you know. And so I stay in jail for a long time. I heard somebody say it doesn't take a genius to get out of jail. It just takes time. And so I get out of jail and Plan B kicks in. You always got to have a Plan B, right? So Plan B kicks in. I end up marrying the guy I got arrested with, so he can't testify against me. I can't testify against him. Got to have a good reason to get married, right? I've known him for 2 weeks. I mean, hey. So we take in sick together, and I end up marrying him. And, of course, you know what happens. Immediately I get pregnant because I'm so desperate to fill that void. But you can only fill a God-sized hole with one thing. But I'm desperate. I have 2 children out of that marriage. I have a son, Micah, that's 40 years old, and I have my daughter, Monica, who's 37. And I will tell you what, this daughter of mine is the joy of my life. And I have these 2 children, and I want nothing better than to be a mother, and I want nothing more than to be a good wife. But I'm an alcoholic, and I don't know what that is. I don't understand a mental obsession and an allergy of the body, and I don't understand what's going on with me. But I know nothing of these things, and I'm just doing what I have to do one day at a time. I moved back to Texas in 1980, and I like to say move because it sounds better than unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. It was one of those spiritual moves in the middle of the night where you're throwing everything for the U-Haul trailer, you know, and you're heading for that state line, and as you cross that state line, you wipe the sweat off your brow, and you're never going back there ever again. And, you know, it's really cool right then because you don't know there's a step 9 in your future, so you're really okay with it, you know. And by the time I got back to Texas, I had made a lot of other really poor decisions. And one of those was one night under the influence of alcohol, I let a friend put a needle in my arm. And by the time I got back to Texas, I'm drinking alcoholically daily. I'm smoking those funny cigarettes. I'm taking those bizarre pills. And I'm putting poison in my veins. And I'm living one day at a time. And I knew about living one day at a time long before I came here. And I'm doing what I have to do on a daily basis to live one day at a time. It wasn't long before that marriage fell apart. It was kind of profound when I came into AA and learned that it takes 2 healthy people to have a healthy relationship. I mean, that was profound to me. You know, wow. And of course, that marriage would dissolve, and I still had these 2 children that I was to be their mother, and I wanted nothing more than to be their mother. But I'm an alcoholic, and I'm doing things that I don't want to do. I'm the kind of alcoholic mother that goes to the store for a loaf of bread and I don't come back for 3 or 4 days. And I don't mean to do that. I'm going to the store for a loaf of bread. And I'm on the way to the store, and I'm supposed to turn right, and my car turns left, and I don't come back for several days. And when I do come back, I'm sick. I'm sick, and I'm tore down, and visibly sick. And I've got these children, these blonde-haired, gold-eyed children who are cleaning their mama up. And they say things to me that I know are the truth. They say things to me like, "Mama, if you don't drink and stay gone, you won't get sick." And I know that's the truth. I know that's the truth. And I make those promises to those babies that I made so many times before. You're absolutely right. I'm not going to go again. Tonight I'm going to stay with you. This weekend I'm going to stay home with you. And we're going to watch a movie, or we're going to go to the park, or I hear the circuses in town, and we're going to go do that. We're going to pop popcorn. We're going to play this game. We're going to do this because my soul screams, I love you, and I want to be your mother. I want to be there for you because you are the most important thing in my life. And so I go off and I start to get ready because I'm going to take them, and I'm going to do this for them because I love you. You are all that matters. But I don't understand this illness that I have. And it only takes a little while as I start to walk off that drunk. And pretty soon they're in the other room and they're starting to get a little bit too loud. And that hand starts to shake. And when that hand starts to shake, that knot starts in my stomach, and it starts getting tighter and tighter, and they're getting a little bit too loud. They're getting a little bit too loud. And then the obsession that I don't understand hits. And when the obsession hits, it's not that I run through the house like a screaming maniac, although on many occasions I have. The obsession hits, and what it does is so cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's just this one little thought that comes into my mind that says, you know, Micki, if you take one drink, it'll quiet those shakes. It'll calm those nerves, and you can go in and be a better mother to those kids. And so I take that one drink, and I might take another. And the next thing you know, I got to go to the store for a loaf of bread. And I left my children with people children don't need to be left with. My children heard things that no child should ever hear. My children saw things that no child should ever see. And my children experienced things no child should ever experience. Thank God I don't get what I deserve. When I was 6 years sober, Alcoholics Anonymous had given my children a mother that they could come to in 6 short years. Because I had started doing things that I said I was going to do. Simple. And my children started coming to their mother with things that were going on in their lives. And my daughter grew up in AA. As a matter of fact, my home group was a closed meeting on Friday nights, and at first I was the weekend mom. My children were living with their father, and I was the weekend mom for a long time in their early lives of my early sobriety. And on Friday nights, my home group held a group conscience and opened the meeting so that I could bring my daughter with me to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous on Friday nights. My daughter has grown up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she came to me. She grew up in AA, and when I was 6 years sober, she came to me because she had met a young man and had started dating this young man, but she was having a hard time with this young man touching her, even touching her. And at 6 years sober, she came to me and let me know why she was having problems in this area. And the reason she was having problems in this area was because when she was between the ages of 4, 5, and 6, while I was at the store getting a loaf of bread, she would be repeatedly molested by the neighborhood 15-year-old boys. How do you make amends for that? How many times do we convince ourselves we're only hurting ourselves? We talk about grace of God so much in these meetings. I'm here to tell you about the mercy of a loving God. The mercy of a loving God and the power of this fellowship that gives us direction to go and steps to follow that allows the healing to take place. The thing that should have torn us apart for eternity has allowed a relationship between mother and daughter to grow stronger than it may have if this had never occurred. And it's with my daughter's permission that I share these things, because we know we're not the only ones. And that healing is possible. We know that because it's happened in our lives. And if it can happen for us, it can happen for others. God's grace and God's mercy is bigger than anything that we have alone. And thank God I don't get what I deserve. Thank God. My daughter's the most amazing human being I know. She's the strongest woman I know. And the things that she has walked through with grace and dignity she has learned here with you. Learned here with you. Well, if you're paranoid that they're out to get you, they are. And in 1986, they came and got me, and I was arrested for a first-degree felony, punishable by up to 99 years in the penitentiary. And I thought they were getting a little bit too serious there in Brazos County, Texas. And after all, I'm just hanging out with my buddies, my pals, my compadres. They call that organized crime in Texas, and they're really serious about that over there. And so I was put in jail. I bonded out, and I'm one of those alcoholics that gets in trouble when you're in trouble. You got any? I see a few of those here. And so I was put back in jail. I was held at no bond and literally lost everything that I had. All those things that I thought it took to look important in life. I lost my cars, I lost my house, I lost my children, I lost everything that I thought it took to look important. And I'm sitting in jail at no bond, and I stayed there a long time. They offered me 20 years at my plea bargain in the penitentiary. I thought that was a little bit too steep, so I decided to take it to the box, and that's a trial by jury. By the way, they say it's a jury of your peers. I promise you there wasn't anybody there I'd have hung out with. But while I'm waiting on this trial and I'm sitting in jail, I listened to some of those jailhouse lawyers, and I heard those people talking about, if you go to AA, it looks good when you go to jail. Now, I'm sure y'all don't have that problem over here in Nashville, but They were sure talking about that one in Brazos County. So they let me out of jail before my trial to get ready for this trial. And so I decided I was almost willing to go to any lengths to look good when I went to trial. So I just decided to check out some of this AA. So I went to a few meetings before my trial just to kind of look good. So I went to the Bryant group of Alcoholics Anonymous to check it out to see what it was about. So I walked into the meeting, and you did what you do. You welcomed me with open arms, and you said, "Come in, sit down. You're the most important person here." And I thought to myself, well, hell, I know that, you know. They said, "Come in, have a seat." And they began to share what it was like and what happened and what it's like now. And one guy said that his drinking had gotten so bad that his wife left him. And he put the plug in the jug, and he went to AA, and his wife came back, and his life was great. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, one wife, one time? I mean, come on. I know some women that'll drink with you. Hang in there. Don't give up. But he was talking about true love, and I was so far removed from any of that, I didn't understand what he was talking about. And this young girl in the back jumped up, and she was so excited. She had worked at this minimum wage part-time job long enough to save up enough money for this used vehicle. And oh, everyone just applauded. They thought this was just so great. And I'm thinking to myself, chick, see me after the meeting. I can get you a better deal than that. Might not have a title, but I can get you a better deal than that, you know. But she was talking about an honest day's pay for an honest day's wage. And I was so far removed from that, I didn't hear the music. I didn't hear the music. And I went to a few more meetings, and I ended up going to this trial. And, of course, they found me guilty because I was. And this jury came back with a sentence that was probably the worst thing you could do for somebody like me. They came back with a sentence of 10 years intense supervision probation. I'm not the kind of person that likes to be told what to do. Now, I wouldn't have minded going to prison and do my little turnaround. Didn't want to go for 20 years, but I wouldn't mind going down and doing my little turnaround and getting out. But here, these people are going to be breathing down my nose, telling me what to do. Now, I'm living in an abandoned house. I have no running water and no electricity. I have nothing but the clothes on my back, and I'm worried about somebody telling me what to do. But nonetheless, I don't want these people telling me what to do. And I was so furious that day, I left that courtroom and did what I needed to do to make it go away one more day. I'll worry about it tomorrow. It was always tomorrow. I'll worry about it tomorrow. Always tomorrow. But for God's sake, give me some relief tonight. The judge, this was in December of '86, the judge gave me till February 5th to get my act together. He said, because I am not going to tolerate one mistake from you. One mistake. He said, I will gladly send you to the penitentiary for 10 years. So I went and did what I knew how to do. I didn't know anything different. He also had court ordered me to 90 meetings in 90 days of Alcoholics Anonymous. They can't do that anymore. Separation of state. They can't do that anymore, but he sure did. I found out later the reason he did that is because his father was a founding member of Alcoholics Anonymous in our area, which was pretty cool. So he gave me until February to get my act together. And I'll tell you, a lot happened from that December to that February. I mean, I just couldn't put the shovel down. People say when you hit bottom, there's only one way to go but up. Well, I'm going to tell you what, I hit bottom and I flopped around like a fish out of water, just going back and forth, and I just couldn't put the shovel down. I had one person who was left in my life. His name was Bud. He was 24 years old. He had hung in there with me through thick and thin. He had watched me lose everything I had and watched the kids go, the house go, the cars go. He watched it all, and he had hung in there with me. I always liked those young men. I always thought if you get those young men, you could train them. So I would do what I had to do, and I would go out to those sordid places the big book talks about, and I would see him across that crowded room, and I would throw out that line and reel him in and share my experience, strength, and hope. And as soon as they would do something I didn't approve of, well, then you have to get rid of them. But you can't get rid of them until you have another prospect, right? You can't ever be without one, God forbid. What would people think? So what I discovered when I did my 4th step, which was very, very enlightening, and if you haven't done one, I encourage you to do so, is that every time I got rid of one, the next one paid for it, whatever they had done. And then the next one paid for what these two did. And what I realized is that I punished a lot of young men for things they never did. It was alarming. And so part of my amends to the male race is to kind of leave you guys alone. But it was alarming, you know. But I had this young man, and I tell you what, he caught the brunt of a lot of jealousies and insecurities, and I'm a control freak, and it was my way or the highway, and it was bad. It was bad. And Bud had really taken a lot of abuse from me. And he was 24 years old, gorgeous young man, and his only fault is he ran into somebody like me. And he came to me one night. We're in an abandoned house, no running water, it's cold, I had a Coleman lantern. And he came to me one night with a lot of questions I had no answers for. He began to ask me questions like what life was about. And I had no answers for him. And then he began to ask me things like what we were going to do. And I had no answers for him. And then he made a grave error. He began to point out my failures. He began to point out that I had just lost my children, that I had just been convicted. I was a convicted felon, and that I was fixing to go to prison because I was doing the same thing that put me there. And I don't know about you, but anytime anybody points out my failures, I do what I have to do to get rid of them, whether that's attack you physically or verbally. And I believe the attacking of you verbally is much worse than physically. Because once you put it out there, you cannot unring the bell. You can say you're sorry and you can make amends, but you can never unring the bell. And I began to slice this young man up verbally. Used to be a professional at it. And I sliced this young man up till finally he dropped his arms, his shoulders, and he said, "Micki, I can't live like this anymore." And I said, "Well, you go ahead and leave, big boy, because I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. If everyone would just leave me alone, I'd be okay." And I really believe that. And that young man turned around and dropped his shoulders and walked out that door, and I cussed him as he walked out. And I went back in that abandoned house and I did what I needed to do to make it go away one more night. I'll worry about it tomorrow. Worry about it tomorrow. The sun came up the next morning, as it always does, and I'm still awake, and I walked outside and I found his solution to our problems. And that young man's body hung from a tree limb with a rope around his neck. And as I was making it go away for one more night, he was making it go away from eternity. He had been at that jumping off place. And the problem was, he had come to me for solution. And I had no answer. Something happened to me at that point. I've seen people dead. I've seen people overdose. I've seen people shot. I've seen people stabbed. I've seen a lot of people dead in a lot of situations. But something happened to me at that moment as I looked death in the face. And when you have no God in your life and death is looking at you, it's a very, very terrifying place to be. I looked death in the face that day and I knew I was next. And I started running. And I started running, and I started running, and when you're trying to outrun your own mind, you can't run fast enough. And I ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran, and the gift happened. The gift happened. And the gift for me was surrender. And surrender for me came in the form of a tear. Because you see, I'm a tough broad. I don't cry. And I've got scars to prove it. But I don't cry. But one tear started running down my face, and when the one tear came, it opened the floodgates of years of uncried tears. And I had to pull off the road. I was in this old truck I'll tell you about, I hope to. And I pulled off on the side of the road, and I began to bawl like a baby, like I had not cried in years and years. And as I started crying, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, I don't know how long I was there, I sat up and I looked around, and I had that deja vu feeling. I knew I'd been there before, but I didn't really know where I was. And I looked around, and then I realized people were walking down the sidewalk carrying the beautiful book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was outside that stupid AA meeting I had been to many months before with no thought, no intention of ever returning to that AA meeting. No plan, never even considered ever going back there again. And here I am outside that AA meeting. And there was some power inside that truck that said, you get in there or you're going to die. And I started up the sidewalk. It was cold. It was raining. I fell down and literally crawled into what I consider my first AA meeting. And I'd love to tell you the Bryant group of AA rushed to my side with a plate of donuts and a cup of coffee, saying, let us help you up, you poor precious child of God. But what they did is they came and they looked down their long skinny noses at me and they said, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And have you had enough? And I had had so much of me I couldn't take me for one more second. One more second. And I got up in a chair and I sat there, and I don't remember anything that was said except keep coming back. And so I kept coming back. And I'm like Earl, I had nowhere else to go. And so I just kept coming back, and I just kept coming back. And somewhere along the line, I heard this was a program of total abstinence. And I said, I got to do this. I got to do this. So I went totally abstinent, and I hung on to that chair. And I'm going to tell you what, it got a lot worse pretty quick. And I started getting real sick. And I don't remember how. It was a spiritual experience, and I remembered I was supposed to go see this probation officer February 5th. And I don't know what day I got sober, but the first day I could put anything on was February 5th of 1987, and that's the day I took as my sobriety date. And I went to see this probation officer, and by then I'm pretty physically sick. I'm psychotic. I've got psychosis going on real good. And I go in to see this probation officer. She looks at me and says, my God, Micki, can you do this? I said, I don't think so. I am coming out of my skin. I'm sick. I'm vomiting uncontrollably. My skin's falling out. My hair's falling out. I'm itching. I'm peeling. And she tried everywhere to get me in somewhere. But 29 years ago in my area in Texas, if you didn't have medical insurance, and drug dealers don't have hospitalization or insurance policies, I didn't have $20,000 or $30,000 saved for a rainy day when I wanted to go to treatment. And the only thing they had available was Austin State Hospital, and there was a 3-month waiting list, and I was dying today. When AA says they can love you sober, by God, I'm living proof. I'm living proof. Because I went into those meetings and I hung onto those chairs, and when I threw up, you cleaned me up, you gave me some nourishment, and you said, honey, if you don't put any more of this poison in your body, this too shall pass, and you never have to go through this again. And I dared to believe you. I dared to believe you, and I hung on, and I hung on, and I hung on. And after about 6 weeks, that sickness started to pass, and then I became dangerous because I started sitting on that back row. In Texas, we call that back row death row. Because I sat on that back row and I started telling you how big and bad and tough I am out there on the street. Let me tell you about those big deals I made. And let me tell you about those times I got away from the law. Now, I'm not telling you about times I got caught, but let me tell you about those narrow escapes from the law. Let me tell you how big and bad and tough I am. Let me tell you who I am in case you don't know. And after a little while, a guy named Charlie. Somebody talked about Charlie up here earlier. And there's a guy named Charlie. Every group's got a Charlie. Charlie's got 15 years sober. Got an answer for everything. I found out later, if they don't know the answer, they'll tell you, it's in the book. I say that all the time now. Charlie came to the back of the room and he said, Micki, why don't you come sit up front with us? And I thought, well, they finally want to know what it's like out there on the street. So I went and fixed my coffee and sat up next to Charlie, who leaned over to me and said, sit here and shut up and listen. I couldn't believe he was talking to the most important person at the meeting that way. So I sat there and I shut up and I listened. And Charlie probably saved my life. And for the next 3 months, the only thing they let me say in the meeting was they let me read how it works. Because there were no cuss words in how it worked. I threw one in every now and then just to kind of liven that thing up, because then it got boring quick, you know. And then they had me be the greeter at the door. Now, you had to really want to get sober when you had to come through the door when I was the greeter. I don't look anything like I look today. When I was the greeter at the door, I've shrunk a little bit, but I'm about 5'10". I weighed about 115 pounds. Thought I was looking good. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I came in wearing skin-tight blue jeans or black leather pants, tucked in these knee-high boots with a brass tip on the end, because I am bad. I had basic black T-shirts with the sleeves cut out and the neck cut out, because I'm hot. I had a big wallet in my back pocket with a dog chain that hung down to my knees and hooked up on my belt, because I've got it going on. I had a big wad of keys on my hip, made a lot of noise when I walked. Now, I'm living in an abandoned house. My truck starts with a screwdriver, but I got a big wad of keys because I'm important. I had a big leather jacket with this fringe that hung down because I'm cool. And I wore this black hat pulled down, and I had to wear my sunglasses because the light was just a little bit too bright in those meetings. And I am your greeter at the door. I had this gray complexion going on because I hadn't been in the sun in 7 years. And I had a filthy mouth and a bad disposition, and welcome to AA. I came driving in this truck. In this truck, I got this truck in a drug deal. Gave a guy $half a gram of dope. He gave me this truck. Figured it out one day. That truck cost me $12.50, and I got ripped off. The truck had been sunk in a tank of water long enough until the entire bottom had been rusted out. I had to steal carpet to put in the floorboard to keep the trash from blowing up in the cab. The only place you could put your feet were on the pedals. Took about 15 or 20 times to get it started, but the guys were so considerate. They usually always stood out on the porch to make sure the truck got started. I found out later they were placing bets, but they were so sweet and high. And people kept talking about getting a sponsor, and I was like, yeah, and I'd look around and see that guy with 30 days by the coffee pot, and I said, Charlie, I bet he could keep me sober tonight. Charlie said, men work with men and women work with women, and I said, well, I hate women. I deal with no women, you know. I hate women. And I became a chronic complainer in AA. I'm sure y'all don't have any of that over here in Nashville, but man, I became a chronic complainer. I'm living in an abandoned house. I got a $12.50 truck. And I became a chronic complainer in AA. And finally, this woman, after a meeting one time, came up to me and told me, "Micki, I want to tell you, you're full of shit," and turned around and walked off. I couldn't believe she was talking to the most important person at the meeting like that, and when I went to tell her that, my mouth opened and a voice like mine came out and said, "Will you be my sponsor?" Grave error. Grave error. I mean, aren't we supposed to have someone we can identify with, you know? Someone that's been down the same path we have been? If I'm looking for someone that's been down the same path I have, I'm looking for someone who is sick as I am. I need someone who knows the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Linda Kay had been a whack in the Army, and Linda Kay knew the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She turned around and looked at me from the top of my head to the tip of my toes and square in the eye, and she said, "I don't like you, but I'll help you because I have to stay sober." Well, la-ti-da. She said, "Do you have a big book?" I said, "No." She said, "Do you have any money?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, steal one, you can make amends later." So I did. I've given away a lot of big books in the last 29 years, I promise you. And I would complain to her, you know, I've got a $12.50 truck. She was so rude to me. She would say things like, "Well, get a job," you know? I mean, get a job? She said, "Well, what do you know how to do?" I said, "Well, weights and measures, you know, sales." So I went to my noon meeting, and they said, "Are there any AA-related announcements?" I said, "Yes, I need a job." And by the time that meeting was over, I had a job working in a sink factory, drilling holes in marble sinks in a 120-degree sweatshop. I learned about punching a time clock. I learned about a day's pay for a day's wage. And when I went to my first meeting that night and they passed the basket and I put my dollar in, I got a standing ovation, and they said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." My probation officer stood in there with me, and she watched me the whole way. She helped me get into school, and eventually I would end up getting some initials behind my name that will ultimately lead me into doing what it is I do today, and, you know, thank God for that. When I become willing and I start showing up and I start doing the things that I'm supposed to do, the doors just open, and if a door closes, a window opens, and opportunities present themselves as long as I am willing to put forth the effort. It just happens, it just comes, and that's for anyone and everyone who's willing to work hard and go the extra mile. And for those of us that have a criminal past, I think we have to go through education and work harder. For me, I've had to work harder, and I have to obey the law more than anyone else. And so I just started doing those things, and I just started going, and I ended up getting a little apartment in the bad part of town, $200, all bills paid, in Crack Alley. But, you know, I would drive up to my apartment, I would hold my breath until I got in my apartment and exhale, because I knew I had to do a urine test tomorrow. You know, I didn't want to test positive. And you know, so I'm watching it, and I got involved. The first 15 years I was sober, I was taking an AA meeting in every weekend into a penitentiary somewhere. I was taking meetings in, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just going with you because that's what you suggested I do. I started taking meetings into the detention center. I got involved in the H&I committee. I got involved with our area conference. I started going and doing things that you were telling me to do because I don't want to die from this disease. I don't want to die. My sponsor got with me, and I did the step work. You know, I did step 1's the problem, step 2's the solution. She said, "Now you've got to make a decision. Either keep drinking and doing what you're doing until you die, and please shut up, or try life on a spiritual basis." And I made a decision to try life on a spiritual basis. I did my inventory, and when I got through with my inventory at step 5, I felt awful. Because for the first time in my life, I knew who I was. Selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, manipulative, horrible person. The miracle for me happened in steps 6 and 7, because for the first time in my life, I know what is wrong with me. But with your direction and God's help, I can change. I can change. And God, please be my employer. God, please give me what I need to be a better person. Please, God, give me direction. And I ask for it daily. I ask for it throughout the day. And so I started cleaning up my past. I thought I was going to have to move from my area because I had all those rationalizations. You know, I knew too many people, I have too many connections. And the wisdom of the old-timers who said, you will stay here and you will look your community in the eye and you will pay back what you have done. Thank God for their wisdom. So I started paying back what I have done, and I could look my community in the eye. I started paying back what I could done. And when the Lions Club wanted to know about Alcoholics Anonymous, I am your girl, I'm going. When the Junior League wanted to know about Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm your girl, I'm going. I got involved. I got involved with everything I could get involved with. And amazing things started happening. I'm doing these things because I don't want to die. And miracles started happening. At 3.5 years, the judge called me back in his chambers, and he said, Micki, I hear the wonderful things you're doing in our community. I believe you're a changed person. And I'm relieving you of the bondage of the state of Texas. After being convicted by a jury of my peers, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And my probation officer, who's still involved in my life, my probation officer said, Micki, I want you to take some further action. I want you to do further action. And I've been taught to take the action and leave the results up to God. And so I took further action. And in 1994, I received a full pardon from the governor of the state of Texas. Now, what is that about? What is that about? Do I need a pardon to feed my ego? I guarantee you I do not. But I knew God had a plan. I knew God had a plan for me, and I would find out what it is. As I said, I went back to school. I got a few initials behind my name, and I started working for a nonprofit organization. I worked my way up to middle management, and 14 years ago, we had major funding cuts in the state of Texas. And when you have major funding cuts and you're working in middle management's the first thing to go. And 14 years ago, I was without a job. I had not had to look for a job since I raised my hand in that noon meeting and said I need a job. And here I am 14 years ago, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I was unemployed 3 days, kind of looking forward to some unemployment. I was unemployed 3 days when a familiar voice called me on the phone and said, hey, I hear you're looking for a job. And I said, yes. And she said, well, why don't you come work with us? And that familiar voice was my probation officer. I could not work there had I not gotten that pardon. And for the last 14 years, I've been working at Brazos County Adult Probation where I was on probation. I'm in the computer and on the computer. I'm also involved in our drug court. I sit on our drug court team. I hear we have some drug court people here. And in 2014, the Texas Drug Court Professionals awarded me with the Judge Joel Bennett Award. I couldn't believe it. My daughter posted on Facebook 27 years ago, all the state of Texas wanted to give my mom was a sack lunch and a pair of handcuffs, and now they're giving her an award. How does this happen? 12 simple steps. What else does pardon mean? I get to serve on a jury. And you know what? It was a jury of my peers. How does that happen? 12 simple steps. Following the direction of a God of my understanding. And that understanding changes frequently, especially with life circumstances. As I've heard Clancy say before, every day is not a holiday and every meal has not been a banquet. There's been a lot of wonderful times in my sobriety, and there's been a lot of tragedies. When I was 6 years sober, I got really, really tired. I'd been working really hard, and I went to the doctor. The doctor ran some tests and came back and said, Micki, you have cancer. It's malignant. It's bad. You need to get your affairs in order. Fortunately, I had a few more affairs than Earl did at the time. And I remember I walked outside and I looked up and I said, God, why me? And I heard my sponsor say, why not you? So I surrendered to my cancer like I did like I did my alcoholism, and I ended up at MD Anderson Cancer Hospital in Houston. I did radiation, I did chemo. My doctor told me, he said, Micki, you're not going to like what we're going to have to do, but I think I can save your life. And I said, let's go for it. I did radiation, I did chemotherapy, I did hands-on healing, I did Reiki. I went to Indian sweat lodges, I did sweat lodges, I slept on beds of magnets, I ate herbs, I drank juices, I did feathers, I did burn sage, I have angels, I have crystals, I have, I went to churches where people fell out on the floor, talked in tongues, waved snakes in the air, lost every hair on my head, had to fight the lesbians off, I did it all, If anybody came by and told me, I believe this will help you, I'm in. I'm in. Let's go. Because it didn't matter whether I believed it would help. You believed it would help. And whatever you believe has power. Just like the lies we believe has power. And a friend of mine came by and said, Micki, are you angry with God? I was so grateful I had done the work. I was so grateful that I no longer had some God on some throne that said, Micki, you look like you're doing okay. Let's flick a little cancer on you and see how you handle that. Because if I believe that for one moment, then God is my problem. My answer was, God, however this journey must end, allow me to walk with the grace and dignity and remain a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. A couple of things just real quick because I'm running out of time. I get to go around, I get to meet a lot of people, I get to talk to a lot of people. And about 15 years ago, I got an email from a young lady who lives in Sugar Land, Texas. We had some communication, and then my daughter Monica and I went and met her. And Kimberly is the daughter I gave up for adoption in 1972. In her time, in God's time, not in my time. I just keep turning the pages with expectations of miracles, because miracles do happen. They do happen. I know that I've had a wonderful time here in Nashville. You guys have been tremendous. My daughter and I will take each and every one of you home with us in our hearts, and we'll remember this trip forever and always. I'm probably not what I should be, and I'm probably not what I could be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be. Thank you for having me.